All right. The Rotary Keokuk Peace Letters, 1932-2022. We just get started. This is Holger Knag, living next to Matthias Schütt, kind of, a wonderful Rotary International president. He said, at the Rotary Assembly, January 2020 in San Diego, Holger said that Rotary is not political, but when things are obviously wrong, we cannot simply look the other way. We, who have the great fortune to live in democratic countries, have the obligation to become active on the basis of our core values and our four-way test. So Holger is supporting our research with these Rotary Keokuk Peace Letters. The story we are telling today concerns two of Rotary's essential basic values: mutual understanding among people of the world and a commitment to supporting world peace. The story begins 90 years ago, 1931. The third Rotary Convention outside the United States took place in Vienna, Austria. Rotarians from around the world arrived in the country's capital. Among the 4,300 attendees at the Vienna conference was 33-year-old American Jewett Fulton, a member of the Rotary Club of Keokuk, Iowa. This rather small town of 10,000 inhabitants on the Mississippi River is named after an Indian chieftain. Matthias.
Yes, thanks a lot. Fulton was not only a participant at the Rotary Convention. In addition, he traveled for several weeks throughout Europe, where his impressions were impacted by economic, social, and political tensions, in many ways similar to those occurring in the United States. Dark clouds were forming across Europe and elsewhere in the world. The global economic crisis of 1929 was well into its third year with no end in sight. And so the small club of Keokuk on the Mississippi west of Chicago set out in December 1931 to send a message by letter to all non-English speaking Rotary clubs outside the United States. Over 500 letters were individually typed, addressed, and sent by mail. In the illustration, you see the letter sent to the Rotary Club of Paris. Among other things, the letter stated, following the old Indian custom, we invite the Rotary Club of Paris to smoke the pipe of peace with us in the spirit as our expression of international goodwill and fellowship. We would be most happy to receive a reply from you, as it is our sincere desire to establish and perpetuate Rotary contacts and friendships outside of our country.
Of the 504 letters Fulton sent, he received 201 responses from 44 different countries. By chance, these neatly filed away letters were found in a bank safe a few years ago, having almost been disposed by the bank where they were stored. Tony Kahn, above, of the Rotary Club of Keokuk, Iowa, rescued this Rotarian treasure in 2016, and we published all the letters in a book form in 2019.
Here is the response from the Rotary Club of Munich, signed by its first secretary, Emil Hirsch. I quote from the second paragraph. Your club's idea that we Germans should smoke the peace pipe with you in the spirit is delightful. When your letter was read to us at our last luncheon, we unfortunately did not have a suitable pipe on hand and had to do with cigars. We hope that this was a worthy replacement. As humorous as these lines may sound, Hirsch's own membership in Rotary came to an ignoble end. He was expelled from the club as a Jew in April 1933, 1 year after this letter, and had to vacate his successful antiquarian bookstore in 1935. In 1938, he was able to emigrate to the United States, bringing along a large number of his valuable books. There he worked in a well-known antiquarian bookstore on Madison Avenue in New York. At the time of Emil Hirsch's expulsion, club president Wilhelm Arendts wrote the following lines to another member. You will no doubt have followed the developments in Germany sufficiently to understand that we consider your removal from our list of members unavoidable. Yours faithfully, the president of the Rotary Club of Munich.
Thank you.
The member who had been excluded was writer Thomas Mann. When he was granted the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1929 for his novel Buddenbrooks, the event was elaborately celebrated, and the club prided itself on having such a special founding member. Mann had a Jewish wife, however, and soon was considered to have a so-called Jewish interrelationship, and in the eyes of the Nazis had committed what they called racial defilement. In 1942, the Rotary Club of West Los Angeles made him an honorary member. Thomas Mann and Emil Hirsch were not the only ones who were deemed unacceptable. By June 1933, the Rotary Club of Munich had expelled a total of 26, or approximately 30% of its membership. Max Weinmann, who had been invited to the Rotary Convention in Vienna 1931 as a highly honored speaker, committed suicide in 1940.
The Leipzig-based German Salir Publishing House just made a study about the Rotary Club of Munich and the Rotary Club of Stuttgart in those years, from 1933 through the total expulsion or shutting down the clubs in 1938. A great historian, Paul Erdmann, wrote 1,000 pages about those two clubs, so we know in details what had happened in those years. Here is the response from the Rotary Club of Heilbronn, signed by Walter Schilling, an entrepreneur in the coffee business who was a founding member of the club. In his two-page letter, he draws a parallel between the, quote, Red Sons of Manitou, quote, referring to Native Americans, who had to defend themselves and their land against the white man, and the Germans of his time, who were beleaguered by a great wave of refugees. Schilling writes, once upon a time, we too were blessed by a great God above us, but then there came the people of the whole world, and we too were struggling for life and nearly annihilated. They were too many for us, and the sunny times faded away. Schilling is referring here to the great wave of refugees during the Weimar Republic, Eastern Europeans who fled to Germany from the ruins of the collapsed Russian Empire. Many Germans did not welcome the largely Jewish refugees of their time who were housed in emergency dwellings at the expenses of German taxpayers. People were afraid of increasing pressure on the already damaged economy, the threat to inner security, and the, quote, Judification of the Western world. The German census of 1925, and this is here an anti-German drawing of the time, the German census of 1925 recorded approximately 108,000 foreign Jews. There were protests throughout the country, attacks and riots. Newspapers that spoke out for democracy and the humane treatment of immigrants were defamed as the Jewish press, Judenpresse. We know that the National Socialists took advantage of these sentiments for their own purposes, and we now see clear parallels in our present situation.
At the Rotary Club of Berlin, established in 1929 at Hotel Kaiserhof in the presence of several Rotarians from other countries, The leading lights of Berlin society gathered: politicians, industrialists, scholars, artists, and writers. Among the founding members were the former Weimar Republic Chancellor Hans Luther. Foreign diplomats were among those who appeared regularly at the club meetings. The response letter to Keokuk is signed by the secretary Heinrich von Gleichen. Here is what he wrote. Precisely in these grave times, in which war is raging in East Asia and conflict prevails almost everywhere in the world, indications of peace, such as those expressed in your letter, are always welcome. Please extend to your president and all of your club members our most cordial greetings, along with the expression of our friendship, which connects us German Rotarians with all those in America. Heinrich von Gleichen was one of 88 German writers who signed an oath of faithful allegiance to Hitler in October 1933. Berthold Manasse, who was Jewish, held the office of treasurer from 1929 to 1933. Following temporary detention in the notorious concentration camp in Buchenwald, he emigrated to Shanghai and later returned to Berlin, where he died in the 1980s. A final note: Arno Breker, Hitler's favorite artist, joined the Berlin Club in 1935.
The website memorial.d-1800.org and the highly commendable book Rotary Under Nazi Rule point out that between 1932 and 1933, a total of 500 names disappeared from Rotary membership lists, almost 1/3 of all Rotarians in Germany at that time. The book in English is via Tony Conn, Rotary Club Keokuk, Iowa, available. Rotary International has hardly intervened, perhaps out of fear of reprisals from the Nazis. Only a small number of German clubs showed solidarity with their Jewish members. In 1937, all German and Austrian clubs were finally banned and dissolved. At the end of the 1940s, new clubs were founded or re-established, in part with individuals who had held important positions during the Nazi dictatorship. By the way, the photograph on the book cover is of a Rotary district meeting in Wiesbaden from the year 1935. The original was retouched for a post-war publication, and the swastika replaced by the Rotarian wheel, as if it were possible to whitewash history after the fact. The responses from all over the world were mostly typed, though a few were handwritten, sometimes with beautifully designed letterheads. Here is an example from the Rotary Club in Gefle, Sweden. On the top are the typed weekly minutes of the Rotary Club in Turin, Italy. Below, that is the stylish letterhead of the Rotary Club of Johannesburg.
We enjoy a close friendship with the Rotary Club of Jerusalem, the only English language club in Israel, which did not exist in 1931. This club, founded by Rotary Club of Cairo, too, sent a letter of response to Keokuk on the day before Christmas 1931. The Rotarian spirit is very well expressed here. The club president writes as follows: We have all sorts in our club, about 10 nationalities, at least 5 different languages represented, and we all find in Rotary a common meeting ground in spite of differences of race, religion, and tongue. We have strong Zionists and equally strong anti-Zionists, Arabs in the club, British, Americans, and Germans. And they all meet amicably as Rotarians, although acutely disagreeing on most other points. He continues, one of my warmest friends is a German surgeon who, as a combatant officer, faced the trenches at La Bassée, in which I was serving. So you will see that we are ourselves a sort of living pipe of peace always being smoked. As already been mentioned, 201 responses from all over the world arrived in Keokuk, which means that approximately 40% of the clubs that received letters responded to the suggestion to symbolically smoke the peace pipe together. Letters came from Wellington and Winnipeg, Montevideo and Madras, as well as from Hawaii and Alaska, which at the time were not yet part of the United States. Letters from Cuba and China arrived as well. Today, we sense once again that fundamental values of our communal life are under threat in the form of nationalism, populism, homophobia. Our commitment to peace and mutual understanding among peoples remains a constant challenge and a perpetual task for Rotarians. Let us never forget Chief Keokuk and his peace pipe.
We have now reached the end of our peace pipe story and our presentation, but we would like to give you a brief update because the story that began 1931 in December is continuing today. In 2019, the Rotary Club of Keokuk, Tony Conn, wrote another letter to every club that received the original 1931 letter from Iowa. And so the Keokuk Peace Letters brought together in Hamburg during the World Convention 135 Rotarians from 68 clubs in 21 countries. All these new Rotarian friends traveled 100 miles north in 2 large buses to our German apartment in Flensburg, border town to Denmark. My tennis buddies served highballs, 4 p.m. In this picture, I'm welcoming all the international guests and highball, strong Kentucky quality bourbon with Schweppes ginger ale. In Germany, you can serve it on a public road. The book party for the Rotary Keokuk Peace Treasure, Letters to Friends, could begin. This is our front yard after the arrival at 4 p.m. Before Europeans arrived in America, there had been around 10 million Native Americans. 90% died soon because of illnesses or had been killed. This summer of 2021, Keokuk, Tony Conn, organized our participation of a sacred pipe smoking ceremony with Chief Reuben and Deerheart Hummingbird. Now, the latest research by Tony Conn, Rotary Club Keokuk, just in the last days, we would give you a tiny glimpse. Rotary Club Tallinn's tragedy and Stalin. Tallinn, the capital of Estonia. This is where our peace pipe letter story starts. 1917, the Russian Bolshevik Revolution, Estonians got their independence. 1929, Jewett Fulton, Rotary Club Tallinn, was a famous charter member, prime minister. 1922-23, he served as a representative from the Baltic states to Rotary International. The most impressive Rotary Club Tallinn charter member was Anton Ernst Piep, professor of international law at the University of Tartu, Estonia. In addition to being a charter member of Rotary Tallinn, Professor Piep was club president in 1931-32. It was he who answered Jewett Fulton's letter from Keokuk 1932. In his letter, Professor Piep makes light of his last name, which in Estonian means pipe. Professor Ernst Piep was also a lawyer, diplomat, and politician, beloved by his fellow countrymen. He was the first president of Estonia then the 5th Prime Minister. He served as the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Ambassador to the United States 1923 through 25. Pipe was a member of the Estonian Foreign Mission in St. Petersburg, Russia, and London, participating in the 1919 Paris Peace Conference at Versailles, ending the First World War. In 1919, he was a member of the Estonian delegation at the Tartu peace negotiations mentioned in his letter. In this treaty, an agreement between Estonia and Stalin, who gave independence to Estonia. Stalin would order Pipe's death sentence 12 years later. So this is just a tiny glimpse into our treasure trove of Keokuk Peace Letters. And we followed, hopefully, your President Joel's advice of guidelines. And we made it not too long, and we are more than happy to answer questions and listen to remarks. Thank you for your patience. Matthias and I love to be with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and moin moin, which means howdy in Northern Germany, as Liz Saunders know, and moin moin also means cheers. Thank you.